This past September, taking a road trip to Myrtle Beach with my family. It was myself, my mother, my sister, her husband, and their 2 kids. We had to use my car and both my sister's and husband's car to transport everything and all of us. We rented a beach house for a little over a week, and we had a pretty great time. I was in the middle of a difficult point in my life, struggling with my employment and being between 2 jobs, and just had started 2 new jobs. I was low on funds and was really worried about making my car payment. So I opted to head home 2 days earlier with my car so I could try to get a few more hours at work. My family expressed being nervous as I planned to leave after dinner and drive through the night to get home. I consoled them and told them that I would be okay to be up all night and I'd head straight home and only stop for gas and food as needed. I'm an excellent driver, a tad impatient, and I tend to go until I absolutely had to stop and take a break. However, this would be a 12-hour trip, and I knew I'd need breaks. So I made the point to stop at every rest stop to at least get out and stretch, so I would stay awake and not get too sore. Going through West Virginia, I'm sure you guys know how secluded the rest stops and visitor centers can be, especially when you're heading north from the south, going through the mountains. I stopped at the visitor center because they advertised having a fast food joint, and I had to piss like a racehorse. This was sometime very late at night, maybe 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. Side note that sent shivers down my spine after what happens. I like to drive barefoot, so I pulled in and noticed that the buildings with the fast food were closed. So I drove around the lot and parked under a streetlight in front of the visitor center so I could use the restroom. Leaning out my car door, I took my time putting my shoes on to walk inside, having looked around and not seeing anything out of the ordinary. I checked my phone and grabbed my wallet before standing up to walk in, making sure my car horn beeped to signal my doors were locked. Walking towards the center, I saw a man in a white hoodie standing at the edge of the sidewalk leading into the center. I didn't think much of it until I passed him and got an off vibe. I glanced over my shoulder and he was watching me walk in. For some reason, I glanced to my left as I turned back to face forward and noted another man sitting on the benches that were on the other side of the tall, thin bushes. Instantly, I thought, nope. I went in and peed, and before I walked out of the bathroom, I called my roommate. As dumb as it was because he was 4 to 6 hours away, I just felt safer. I gave him a quick rundown of my situation and made him stay on the phone with me. I started to walk out, and I couldn't see the man at the front of the sidewalk anymore. I glanced to my now right and saw both men standing next to the bench. Facing forward, I saw a couple walking in to use the restrooms as well. I had an impulse to ask them to walk with me, but my paranoia kicked in because I knew something was wrong somewhere in my situation, and I didn't ask, thinking they might know the men. I walked briskly to my car. I explained to my roommate that the men were by the benches. I peeked over my shoulder again, and I saw the men with the white hoodie walking towards me, and I told my roommate. Walking a few more steps forward, I looked back again and saw that his pace had quickened. At this point, I told my roommate he's following me to my car, and I booked it. I thankfully had a key fob. I got my key out and ready, and unlocked my car and practically threw myself inside of it, not daring to glance back. I threw my car in reverse and gunned it backwards before going back into drive and sped off and didn't even stop to put my seatbelt on till I was at the exit to leave the parking lot. I didn't look back once. The next stop I made was at the toll road, and I filled out a report and the workers called the state troopers to head over there and check things out. I couldn't stop shaking for hours, and I refused to get out of my car until I was home. I terrorized myself at the thought of if these guys paid attention and made their move more quickly, they could have got me at my car while I was facing the ground putting my shoes on, and I would have absolutely had no defense. When I was younger, me and my family went on a road trip to Wyoming to see Yellowstone National Park. It was a beautiful place, and if you hadn't seen it yet, I'd recommend it. Anyways, so from our home in California, it was about a 17-hour drive in our Yukon XL. the largest, most comfortable road trip SUV you can imagine. It took us several days worth of on and off driving to get there, and during the nights, we would try to find a little motel to rest at. One of the nights, due to being behind schedule, my dad attempted to drive through the night to get us there sooner. He made it probably into the wee hours of the night before he deemed it unsafe and parked us in a little unlit rest stop in the middle of the woods in some flyover state. Me and my brothers had fallen asleep in the car several hours before he had stopped. So for the last couple hours, we were all sleeping in the car in this dark little parking lot surrounded by forest. Having got a couple hours of sleep and being in a pretty uncomfortable position, I woke up in the middle of the night, pretty disoriented, but not really scared. I look around to see everyone's fast asleep in a pitch black car, and naturally I feel pretty alone. I try to fall back asleep, but it's just not working, so I just sit there for a while. Boredom begins to set in. I begin to look out my window to see where we were, and it's just pitch black, so I couldn't see jack shit. Luckily, I wasn't the type to pack light and had brought a couple of flashlights in my bag. Being careful not to disturb my sleeping family, I reached into the back seat and unzipped my bag. I pulled out a little plastic yellow flashlight. It wasn't the brightest, but it was enough to see the foreground and the general surroundings. I put it up to the glass, making sure not to make a noise, and I pushed the little switch into position. I pressed my face onto the glass and looked out. At first it was a normal tree line, with some bushes and trees. But as I scanned the darkness, looking for animals, buildings, anything, I noticed a dark shape standing between these two trees in the distance. It looked like the shape of a man, but it wasn't moving, just standing there. After watching it for a good while and seeing no real signs of movement, I just assumed it was a bush of some kind. Just when I was about to turn off the light and reattempt sleep, I saw the shadow turn 90 degrees and move behind a tree, disappearing from sight. This scared the shit out of me, and I immediately turned off the flashlight and threw my sweater-turned blanket over my head, shutting my eyes tightly and covering my ears. I was paralyzed with fear, too full of adrenaline to get any sleep. I sat in a semi-fetal position, clutching my flashlight for the rest of the night. I waited till the sun came up and we were back on the road before I got any sleep. I didn't tell anyone about the man that I saw in the woods. This happened very recently, only about 4 days ago, while I was camping with my best friend. We were both seniors in high school, and we were on a road trip for spring break. We live in Oregon, and drove down the coast to Northern California. We had a late start leaving our houses, and arrived at a little beach south of the Redwoods just after 9 p.m. It was pouring rain, and dark out, so we parked on a dirt road that had access to the beach, and decided against walking down the sand to set up camp. My friend drives a Toyota pickup with a camper shell covering the bed, which has a mattress in the back, so we decided to just sleep there. The beach area where we were was very secluded and belonged to a local Native American tribe that didn't mind visitors using the site, as long as they were respectful. After talking for a while in the shelter of the truck, my friend falls asleep. Before drifting off myself, I realized I had forgot to lock the passenger door of the truck. All of our valuables were stored in the cab, so I hoped nobody would come along and rob us in our sleep. After a dreamless few hours of sleep, I heard the sound of the driver's side door handle of my friend's truck begin to lift. The door happened to be locked, and I was awake at this point. Terrified whoever had been trying to open the door would go around to the unlocked side, or try to get into the bed, where they likely had no idea we were sleeping. It was still dark out at this time, but I heard footsteps start to walk around the back of the truck. I grabbed a flashlight and shined it through the back of the window of the camper shell, in hopes of alerting the intruder that people were in the vehicle. I heard footsteps get a little farther away. Then I heard the sound of sticks snapping and something heavy being thrown. Then the man let out a long, guttural yell. A few moments passed and more things were thrown, and more general yells mixed with the occasional F-bomb at the top of his lungs. It didn't take more than 2 or 3 yells before I woke up my friend. "Dude, there's a crazy man outside. He tried to get in the truck, and now he's walking around yelling. as I shook his shoulder. My friend sat upright and tried to peer out the window, but it was still pitch black out. I checked my phone, and it was 5 a.m. The sounds of the man walking around the woods near our truck didn't let up. Neither did the frequent yells and sounds of him throwing and smashing what I could only guess were logs or large rocks. Occasionally we would hear his yells from farther away, and we thought he was leaving, only to have him return yelling right by our truck only moments later. We sat huddled in fear for a good hour, unsure what to do. His shout sounded as though he was full of rage, but never attempted to get into the truck again. Eventually, the owners of the other car that was parked on the dirt road came up to the vehicle and drove off as the sky started to lighten. We didn't hear any more yelling or log throwing after that. We eventually were both able to fall back asleep for a few hours, waking up around 10 a.m. It was hard to believe that terrifying hour at the crack of dawn even happened, but both of us remember it too vividly to dispute. We still have no idea what the man was doing or why he sounded so angry. But to the guy screaming profanities in the dark by our truck, let's not meet. I was on a road trip with my aunt. She isn't my real aunt, but she and my mom are best friends, so I call her that. So we were driving back from Michigan to North Carolina. We drove up there so we could see her family, and so I could see my girlfriend at the time. I must have been 18 or 19. Now some background on us. I'm 6'1", and in pretty good shape. My aunt is about 5'7", and we are both black. Now I don't remember what state we were in, but I remember we had been driving for a couple of hours. We were getting dangerously low on gas, and we needed to stop. So we pulled off of the highway, and after driving through a town, we found a gas station. My aunt got out to pump gas, and I went to go use the restroom. Now, I've always been super cautious, and inside this gas station had that horror movie energy. I walked into the bathroom, and it seemed like I was the only one there. I stood at the urinal. I looked down at the top of the urinal was a card, and I remember thinking that's a pretty weird place to put it. It was some sort of doomsday message type of thing, so I just ignored it. As I'm zipping up my pants and turning around, I could feel someone looking at me. You know how you can just tell? I turned around, and I have never felt so small. This man was at least 6'8". He was just huge. The scariest thing about this was I didn't hear him come in. There was no way he came to that door without me hearing him. He had to have been there already. I tried to get around him, but he stopped me. This is the conversation we had. Can I get past you, please? I saw you read the card. How about I take you to my house so I can teach you what it really means? Nah, I'm good. I tried to push past him, but he followed me out and started yelling at me. Your kind's gonna be the first race to die out. And how he was gonna enjoy watching y'all die. I ran back to the car and screamed at my aunt to get in the car. Gotta love black aunties, 'cause she didn't even question it. She just got in the car and started it, and we sped off. Luckily, she had already paid. We tell the story from time to time now, laughing about how crazy the guy was I met in the bathroom. But to this day, I always check to see if I'm alone in the public bathroom. The way the man stared at me gives me chills. So creepy huge guy in the gas station bathroom, let's not meet again. My friend and I were driving for 3 hours to visit some friends at a different university for a party. It was a January night in Michigan, so below freezing temperatures and at least a foot of snow. We were about an hour or so into the trip, and having a very in-depth discussion about a certain fantasy book series. It was very in-depth, to the point that the low gas light came on, I noticed, and then promptly forgot about it. So the next thing I know, we lost power steering, and we are quickly slowing down. I pull over to the shoulder and realize that I'm a dumbass and we ran out of gas. We check Google Maps and it shows that there's a gas station less than a half mile away, near a road on the other side of the field. It's cold, and we were poorly equipped for the cold, only having one pair of boots and one pair of gloves between the two of us. But it's only half a mile, so we decide we'll go for it. Not much choice anyway. So we make it across the field to the road, and there's nothing there. We figured maybe the GPS was off a little bit, so we start heading down the road towards some lights. We make it maybe 1/4 of a mile before noticing there's some flashing lights over where we had left our car. A state trooper is checking the car out, so we immediately start making a beeline for the car, sprinting and shouting, hoping that he'll see us. But it's dark, and he doesn't, and just pulls away. My friend is a bit more out of shape than I am, and he falls behind, and uses the opportunity to call 911, asking them if they can send the trooper back. They say yes, but we have to be there when he arrives. So I take off sprinting again, my friend a little ways behind. We're both a bit past our prime cross-country days. So now the path that we were taking cuts through a small stand of trees, maybe 100 feet across. I opt to go through it, thinking it would be faster and a more direct option. My friend decides he doesn't like the look of it and is going around. I make it a good 30 feet or so before realizing these trees are actually some little swamp, and I am now standing in 6 feet of freezing water. I'm also the one with the gloves, but not the boots. I shout out to my friend, "Shit! I've stepped in a pond!" Somehow he hears me. "Help! I've stepped in a trap!" He's kind of freaked and thinks that some farmer has set up one of those bear traps and I've gotten stuck in it. He asks if I need help, to which of course I say no. I opt to continue trying to make it through the pond. I'm cold and wet anyways, hopping from tree to tree as I can and hoping it doesn't get any deeper. Meanwhile, my friend is still running around the side of the trees. Apparently, I don't need assistance with my leg stuck in a bear trap, so he continues on his way. Then he falls into a hole. Like, there was just a 3-foot hole in the ground that he didn't see in the dark, and he falls into it. He makes it out okay, but is now also very covered in snow, and of course without gloves. We both make it back, cold, wet, and freezing, about a minute before the officer shows up. We get in, give him our story, and he laughs and says, "Yeah, there's no gas station out there," and just takes us to the next exit where there was one. He also told us that we were the 9th car that had run out of gas that day, so I felt marginally less stupid. About 3 months ago, my wife, then fiancé, and I were driving from Oregon to Arizona. We were in a part of Nevada that was in the middle of nowhere. We were on the end of a 70-mile stretch with no cell service, and it was midnight. My wife is a small girl, only 5'1", about 100 pounds. I often joke when I see her at work, "Oh, it must be take your child to work day." She's that small. It was my wife's turn to drive at this point, so I reclined in my seat, out of view, sleeping. All of a sudden she shakes me awake and says, "This guy has been following me on my ass for a while." I glance behind to see a big F-350, only 10 feet behind us. I tell her to just speed up, figuring he just wanted us to go a little faster, but he keeps the same distance from us. All of a sudden he shoots out to the oncoming lane and overtakes us, then proceeds to slow in front of us, bringing our speed down to only about 10 miles per hour. She backs off a considerable distance when he slams on his brakes and starts opening his door. At this point I sit all the way up and I roll down my window, and I'm a pretty big guy. He spots me, slams his door shut, and takes off. I'm not one to jump to conclusions, but I feel like if he didn't see me, he would have definitely tried to take my wife. It shook us pretty bad, and at the next gas station we found, the attendant called it in. Luckily, I got his plate numbers. And that's why you don't drive in the middle of nowhere, alone, in the middle of the night. You never know who's out there.